Oh, it is time for some fantasy. We went through some sleepers yesterday. If you missed it, check it out, cbssports.com. Our fantasy experts' sleepers for the season. We're going to hit some breakouts today. We've got Jamie Eisenberg here on set with Amanda Guerra and Chris Hassel. We also have Heath Cummings coming to us virtually. Hello, Heath. Let's start with some running back news, though, that came about yesterday. We had the Dalvin Cook and the Zeke situation. Let's start with Dalvin and the Jets. I'm disappointed as a Breece Hall fan that Dalvin Cook ended up there.
I am as well. You know, I hope to see a healthy Breece Hall, and it's great news that he's off the PUP list, so that's clearly that he's trending in the right direction. But this is obviously a sign that either A, they're not sold on Breece being back to that guy that we saw last year that was so dynamic, or they're just not happy with the backups there. But we also know this is a team that's in a win-now mode because of Aaron Rodgers and trying to get the best players around him. So it's a knock on Breece. You know, he was already somebody I was concerned about because of the injury. Year one for guys coming off an ACL tear is pretty tough to trust. So I'm probably not going to draft him. We still see him going in the third round based on his average draft position. For me, the earliest I would take him would be round 5.
Yeah, I'm looking at more at round 6. And I do think that he is a guy who might be a great candidate to not draft. And then when we get to week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8, then maybe go send a trade-off route. Because I'd expect a slow start for Breece Hall. I'd expect for Dalvin Cook to be in that 1A role early in the season. But I do think if Breece Hall gets back to being Breece Hall and you have a 28-year-old Dalvin Cook going down the stretch, we could see a finish for Breece Hall like we saw from J.K. Dobbins last season. So I'm okay with acquiring Hall in the middle of the season, but I agree with Jamie entirely. I'm not going to be drafting him.
And where are you going with Cook then? I mean, when the first round you should be looking for him is what?
Probably round 8. You know, again, you're talking about can he get you off to a good start? He's got a shoulder injury too. You know, let's keep that in mind. He's going to, start practice next week. So if Breece Hall is right, Dalvin Cook's not going to be very productive. And if Breece Hall is wrong, then Dalvin Cook could be a potential superstar. So it's just a matter of moderating expectations. I think he's best served, though, as a number 3 or even number 4 running back.
The other running back finding a new home in the past 24, 48 hours. I don't know what day
24,
it is right
I think,
now.
yeah.
I think 24 hours. Zeke leading with the Patriots there, had 12 touchdowns for the Cowboys last season. What does it look like with him on the Pats for him, but not only him, but Ramondre Stevenson as well?
I hope that people who are concerned about Ramondre Stevenson look at this and say, okay, great, now I don't have to worry about drafting him because then he'll fall to a great spot for me because I still think he's going to be the best running back in New England, probably by a significant margin. Ezekiel Elliott looked bad last year, and by a lot of metrics, he was one of the worst running backs in football. He just happened to fall into the end zone quite a bit. Now, that's one thing that I think people look at Ramondre Stevenson and say he doesn't do as well potentially as Ezekiel Elliott. But this is a guy, again, that I think is going to struggle to get touches. He was on the market for a reason. It wasn't like Dalvin Cook where people were sort of coveting him. This was really the only place that we heard of Ezekiel Elliott going to visit. So for me, Stevenson is still a guy you could take in the third round, and Elliott is somebody that you're just hoping, again, can fall into the end zone and be productive. I have no interest in Ezekiel Elliott. Let somebody else draft him. I'm still going to be very, very aggressive in targeting Ramondre.
Looks like Heath is interested.
Well, I'm interested at the right cost. I've got him as a round 10 pick. So if drafting Ezekiel Elliott in round 10 makes me the Ezekiel Elliott guy, then so be it. But I mostly agree with what Jamie said. I think this is probably the best case scenario in full PPR for Ramondre Stevenson. They were looking at adding some backs who kind of have more pass catching chops than Zeke does. I think Zeke takes over a fraction, maybe a large fraction of that Damian Harris role from the past. He might score 7, 8, 9 touchdowns. He's not quite going to have the Jamal Williams season, but maybe a discount Jamal Williams season. But I think this locks Stevenson in as the pass catching back. He could be a 60 or 70 catch back once again.
They had 25 rushing touchdowns 2 years ago, only 10 last year. Damian Harris scored 15 of them 2 years ago. So I think what we would see is probably a split closer to, hopefully 20 total touchdowns for the running back position. I still think Stevenson's going to be the better of the two, by far.
Zeke and Cook with new homes. We got that news yesterday. Let's move on now to running back.
That's 24 hours ago.
Breakouts,
not
24 hours, yes.
The days, it's not even football. I mean, it is football season, but it's not, and it's already a blur.
She's been in Japan and South Dakota more than she's been at her own house the last month or so.
Those are two very different places. Yeah.
Breakouts at the running back position. I'm going to go to you first, Heath, because you're going with a guy who is going to get those touches that Dalvin Cook got in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's been a great 24 hours for Alexander Mattison because we're not going to see Ezekiel Elliott there. We're not going to see Dalvin Cook back in Minnesota. He still might get Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette as company. Listen, if you look at what Alexander Mattison has done and the few opportunities he's had to play even 50% of the snaps, it's been 20 PPR fantasy points per game. It's been over 100 yards in each of those games. I like him as a mid-range number 2 running back who probably doesn't have the same juice that Dalvin Cook did at his peak, but he may have as much juice as Dalvin Cook had last year.
I like the setup for him. I like the setup for another guy in the same division. That's Jahmyr Gibbs. You're looking at the rookie running back coming out of Alabama, and unbelievable opportunity for him. Just talking about replacing DeAndre Swift and maybe taking a little bit of what Jamal Williams left over. Now, David Montgomery's there. He's going to be a big factor. Clearly, they didn't bring him in as a free agent to just watch Jahmyr Gibbs, but obviously you saw what happened at the NFL draft. They went out and drafted this kid 12th overall, and the history of running backs drafted in the first half of the first round of the NFL draft is very, very good. But I look at just what Swift did last year. Top 10 in running back targets, top 12 in running back receptions. And Jahmyr Gibbs, oh, by the way, just led Alabama in receptions with 44 last year. So the highlight reel has been already fantastic just looking at what he's done in training camp. But I think he's going to be a special talent. And should he get a foothold in the running portion of the Detroit offense, my gosh, they scored 17 rushing touchdowns last year to lead the NFL, at least Jamal Williams did. If he can get any foothold there, he's going to be a real special talent. So he's a top 12 running back for me in PPR, a little bit lower in half in non-PPR because the touchdown potential could be a problem. But the receptions, he could be in the top 5 receptions for running backs, and that's pretty hard to pass up.
So those are breakout running backs. Let's talk about breakout wide receivers. I want to start with you because you're going with Jerry Jeudy. Last season, hopes he could potentially be a breakout with Russ coming to town. Just everything with the Broncos, just do that. Yeah. But Sean Payton is there now, and you have hope for Jeudy this season. I
really do. Obviously pedigree is important, and he was one of the premier receivers coming out in the 2020 class. The first 3 seasons have been frustrating with injuries and poor play, like you said, but he closed last season on a high note, and specifically the last 2 games when it wasn't Nathaniel Hackett calling plays. And so I know it was frustrating to watch how Jerry Jeudy and the entire Broncos offense performed in their first preseason game. It was so bad that Sean Payton kept them out there against second and third string defensive guys, and Jeudy did score a touchdown. But you look at the loss of Tim Patrick. I don't know what to expect from Marvin Mims. Greg Dulcich's not even the number 1 tight end. So it's going to be a lot of Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, who's a great value pick around pick 100. But Jeudy has a chance to have finally that breakout campaign. So build off his last 4 games overall, specifically, again, those last 2. I think as bad as Russell Wilson looks, he can still support a receiver being a top 15 caliber guy. So this is going to be Jerry Jeudy's best year.
We'll go from Nathaniel Hackett's 2022 number 1 wide receiver to his 2023 number 1 wide receiver. I'm going with Garrett Wilson. I appreciate Jamie leaving this one for me. A very giving man he is. Wilson combining with Aaron Rodgers. We've seen Rodgers target that number 17 in green, and he's going to be doing it a lot this year. Devontae Adams, when he played with Rodgers, consistently saw a 30% target share. I would not be surprised if Wilson gets into that range this year. He's that type of talent. He was at 17 PPR fantasy points per game when he didn't play with Zach Wilson last year. But that's not like he was playing with good quarterbacks then. He was playing with Joe Flacco and Mike White. Aaron Rodgers, while he's declined a little bit from his peak, much better than those guys. I expect a ton of volume and increased efficiency from Wilson. He has an opportunity by the end of this year to be the number 3 wide receiver in Dynasty behind only Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
Garrett Wilson, 1,100 yards as a rookie. There was a rookie tight end a couple of years ago that went over 1,000 yards. As we move to the breakouts at the tight end position, Heath, why do you feel like last season and the injury issues and all that is going to be wiped away by Kyle Pitts?
You can't be as talented as Kyle Pitts is and go this long without giving us the fantasy production that we deserve. Listen, I've been in the unfortunate position the last 2 years of calling him a bust, and it's no fun to call a unicorn like Kyle Pitts a bust. I'm glad his ADP has fallen a little bit, and we can just talk about the breakout potential. He runs routes and earns targets like a wide receiver. He dealt with some of the worst quarterback play in all of the NFL last year. Desmond Ritter's not great, but I do believe he will be better than Marcus Mariota. Maybe more important, he won't take off and run as often as Mariota, so there will be more pass attempts for this Falcons offense, enough to support both Pitts and Drake London as 1,000-yard receivers. The thing that will be different from his rookie season is he's actually going to score some touchdowns this year as well.
It's going to be fun to watch. It's hard to find a breakout tight end outside of those first 7 guys because they're all pretty well established aside from Pitts. And like he said, we hope to see that big season coming. But I think also another third-year tight end you can look at is Pat Freiermuth. And I know it's hard to say I'm going to trust Kenny Pickett, but I think I'm going to trust Kenny Pickett. I like what I saw in that first preseason game. He looked more confident. And I think the best thing about it is they draft the tight end from Georgia, Washington, who's going to be a better blocking tight end than Freiermuth, freeing him up to play some more in the passing game. And he had 7 touchdowns in his rookie campaigns, dropped down to 2 last year when the entire passing offense was just absolutely anemic. But I do think a different role, probably going to end up being in competition for second on the team in targets after Deontay Johnson. So once you get past those first 7 tight ends, who could be maybe someone that challenges to be in that group? The touchdown potential's already been there. The touchdown production's already been there. The touchdown potential's still there. And if Kenny Pickett looks competent, he can support Deontay Johnson, and one of the other 2 guys of Freiermuth or Pickett, based on the position that Freiermuth plays, it's worth taking a chance on him with a late round pick.
And Mike Tomlin very open about, look, we were conservative with him last season. This season, definitely going to let him air it out a little bit more. Okay, talking about quarterbacks here, breakout quarterbacks, we could potentially see. Heath, I'm going to start with you because Chris claims to be a Bears fan. I don't know if I have ever seen him cheer for the Bears.
Well, there's not been much to cheer for since I've known you.
Well, maybe this season there will be a little bit more. Heath, you're going Justin Fields.
Yes, and we have seen this story many times before. We saw it with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. We saw it with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. We saw it last year with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. You add an elite number 1 wide receiver to a quarterback who's already shown the ability, succeeds with his legs, and it turns that quarterback into a fantasy superstar. We are going to see that from Justin Fields this year. You saw it in the first preseason game. That wasn't even a good pass Justin Fields threw. It wasn't even past the line of scrimmage, and DJ Moore takes it to the house. He is going to be such a huge help to Fields. You bumped Darnell Mooney down to the number 2 wide receiver. You bumped Chase Claypool down to the number 3 wide receiver. Suddenly, the Bears don't have a terrible passing game. And oh yeah, Fields is probably still going to average 50 to 60 yards rushing per game. He has the potential, just like Hurts did last year, to be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy this season.
Love the setup for Justin Fields. We just did a video, real or mirage? Is he going to be in contention to be the number 1 quarterback this year? And it was a little fun conversation Dave and I had. You can check it out on our social media accounts. I like Tua Tagovailoa as a breakout quarterback. I'm trying to appease one of our top executives here, Marilyn Berkson. But I love the setup for Tua, just with the chance to build off what he did when he was healthy last year. It was very frustrating watching all the concussions, obviously, and we hope to see him on the field for the majority of 17 games. But Heath mentioned this. You give a quarterback that has some talent, a premier wide receiver, and he's got 2 of them. You can make a case he's got the best wide receiver duo in the NFL with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And if he could just stay healthy, we saw a 50-point fantasy game for him last year. He had several games over 30 fantasy points per game. He's going to have a chance for a huge season and maybe shatter his average draft position. Wouldn't be surprised to see him in the 4,500, 45 touchdown range if he stays on the field. So you got to make sure you take a second quarterback if you draft Tua. So a good fallback option could be, let's say, somebody like Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins, one of those top-tier number 2 guys. But if Tua does play the majority of the season, you're going to be thrilled that you got him on your team because you're getting him after those top 5 guys. But again, he still has that top 5 upside.
Those are our breakouts from our fantasy studs, Jamie Eisenberg and Heath Cummings. They have brand new emergency podcasts on the breaking news yesterday at the running back position with Zeke going to the Patriots, with Dalvin going to the Jets. They go much more in-depth on how that's going to affect everything in those 2 situations. Check it out, Fantasy Football Today.